178 of Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdren and Barry. Let me now bring in my co-host, the man that after last week's revelation, folks, is single and he's ready to mingle. Barry Rose. Barry, how you doing, my man?
I'm $1 million this week, Jeff.
Well, you were $500,000 last week, so obviously you're a little better. So, Barry, great episode waiting for the folks to listen to. Today we are joined by friend of the show, Kevin Kelly, New Japan World, WWE, and for you folks in the Sunshine State, former IWF announcer, Kevin Kelly. And Kevin, this is a special announcement, will be taking questions from the listeners of our show. How cool is that, Barry?
That is beyond cool, Jeff.
Yes. Well, I thought of it, so you're absolutely right. But besides that, Barry, it is Dick Murdoch Day here on Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdren and Barry. Salute! Today we are talking about Captain Redneck, Dick Murdoch, and because of the voting that took place on our Facebook page, Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdren and Barry, I gave you 4 options. I said, which one of these matches do you want to see? The voting was very close between 2 matches. Those 2 matches are Dick Murdoch versus Terry Gordy from Houston, Texas, October 8th, 1982, and Dick Murdoch versus, Barry, get out the hand lotion now. It's Killer Karl Cox. And it's December 1976 from Tokyo, an old-fashioned throwdown. I know you can't be any more excited, Barry.
This has the potential of being my favorite episode. How many episodes? Is it 177?
178, my friend.
178. This has the potential of being my absolute favorite of all time based off of that.
Let me just say to you, the listener out there, that after 178 episodes, Barry and I have decided that we are going to be looking into the negotiations are ongoing. I hope to have a major announcement in the next week or 2 of going a Patreon episode. And we will get into that in further detail towards the end of the show. But the reason I bring this up now is before we go to our interview with Kevin Kelly, we reached out to listeners of the show, folks that are on our Facebook group, active members of our group, people that care about us, Barry, unlike certain people that say they care, but let's be honest, they really don't. And so we reached out and said, would you like to ask huge, big deal Kevin Kelly, the voice of New Japan World, former WWE announcer, would you like to ask him a question? The reason I bring this up is because this is the kind of thing that could be of use to us on a future Patreon episode. So think about that, folks. Would it be worth you spending, I don't know, $1, $2 to have the opportunity to ask maybe Kevin Kelly on a 3rd appearance on our show, or some other Steve Kern, Bob Roop, I don't know, somebody that's been with us in the past may come back and be willing to answer questions from you, the listening audience. Boom. Barry, what do you think?
I think it's a great idea. It's we've had 2. It would be nice if is there anywhere we can see a list of the guests that we've had on the show? I know I can search by episode and go, but we don't have like a running tally of any sort of all of our guests, but we've had some heavy hitters, and I like that idea. I think that's great. Jeff, let me ask you a question too. Of all the guests that we've had, and we've had some great ones, Jimmy Garvin, Kevin Kelly, Bob Roop, obviously.
Ron Fuller.
Ron Fuller, multiple times. Ron Fuller, Barry Horowitz, Mr. Technical. We haven't spoken with him. Who would you like? Why don't we do this? Somebody that we've only had on maybe once, maybe twice. Who would you like to have out of that entire roster back on with us?
A valid question. Always love having
it is for me is why I know who it is for me.
I always love having the Tennessee stud on. He's a fountain of knowledge about the wrestling, the history of the wrestling business. So that's always a good go home. I've said before, the guest we've never had before that I'd love to talk to is Cowboy Bill Watts, because I think he's such an integral part of, parts of the wrestling business. Let's see. Maybe Jimmy Jam. He was such a great guest. We broke it over 3 episodes. Maybe it's time to talk to Jimmy Jam again in the future. What do you think?
Yeah, Jimmy Jam was good. For me, I think Stan Hansen. Stan was a guy that, arguably, I think one of the best careers in the history of professional wrestling. And we only had him on. I want to say we were, we could only get him for 40 minutes. He was babysitting his granddaughter at the time. So imagine if we had Stan Hansen on for like 2 hours, 2.5 hours. That would be incredible.
My favorite part of the Stan Hansen interview is, Stan, where's your favorite place in the whole world to eat? He said his wife's kitchen. That was just pretty hilarious that he'd rather eat his wife's food than go to a restaurant. That was pretty funny. So we're going to be going to our interview. This is going to be part 1 of our interview with Kevin Kelly, because let me tell you, we thought the interview went so well that we went a little bit longer than we expected. Thank you very much, Kevin Kelly, for that. So we're breaking the interview into 2 parts. So those of you that were lucky enough to be chosen to ask these questions, if you do not hear your question asked this week, it will be next week for sure on the second part of our interview with Kevin Kelly. So Lou, why don't we throw it to our chat with huge deal, big deal, the voice of New Japan and friend of the show, a good guy, Kevin Kelly. Barry, it is that time again. You know what I mean. It's time to talk to the man that they call Mr. New Japan. That's right. He's not ROH Kevin Kelly anymore. He's New Japan Kevin Kelly. Barry, how excited are we to have Kevin Kelly joining us once again?
We love Kevin Kelly, too. And I think I mentioned this, Jeff, the last time that Kevin was on the show. And we should have Kevin on more frequently, because I did think his appearance was off the charts. But he was, I think, the first wrestling celebrity to reach out to me when I created the old CWF Archives website, and he signed the guest book. And I was super excited. I'm like, this is Kevin Kelly. This is the guy. And at that point, I realized he had actually seen CWF. I don't think I knew that ahead of time, but a wealth of knowledge, so much going on in Japan currently, Jeff. And I don't know about you, but since I made my move a couple of weeks ago, I now have Roku, and that's pretty much all I watch. And you know what, Jeff? New Japan is on Roku. How exciting is that?
That may or may not be one of the reasons we have Kevin joining us today. I'm not going to divulge that. But I tell you what, Kevin, before we get into talking about New Japan and some of the other stuff we want to discuss with you, I was telling Lou and Barry before we started recording, I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, the recent images on Twitter and Facebook of Antonio Inoki. Did you see that this morning?
I did.
Very, very troubling. He looks to be in some very poor health.
Yeah, again, he's in his late 70s? Is he like 77 or 78 or so?
Yes, I think he's right, because he was born in 43. I actually looked up that this morning.
Okay, yeah, so he's it's like watching your grandparents or your parents, start to go downhill, and you realize the inevitable is coming, and it's never a good thing. So
yeah, I didn't know if you'd heard anything via your New Japan connections, before we saw that video today. If when you were over there, as you were a few weeks back, if you had heard any rumblings or anything. Inoki's in poor health. I mean, I know he's not affiliated with the company anymore, but for so long he was the face of the company.
That is just the general information that we hear, exactly, almost verbatim. Jeff, Inoki's in poor health. Yeah. So they're kind of standing watch, if you will, and just at the ready in case something happens.
Yeah. So, okay. So first question I have for you, Kevin, is, and I actually reached out to Kevin about this, Barry, and said, am I okay talking about this? Very controversial tenure in New Japan by, I want to say his name right, Kevin, last name. Harold, is it Mej? Mage, okay. Who was recently taken out of his position as president of New Japan. So tell me, how was it working for Harold, and now post-Harold, how are things in the New Japan locker room and dressing room, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, everything is the same as it was before Harold, during Harold, and after Harold. It really had no bearing on the day-to-day of what goes on with me and my job, for example, or the wrestlers wrestling. It would just be occasionally there would be events where, oh, look, there's Harold signing autographs and shaking hands and taking pictures with the fans in the lobby. Oh, isn't that wonderful? And he did things that were different, that's for sure, whether it was good, bad, whatever. He did different things. tried some different things, and was met with, some resistance, some openness. And in the end, it wasn't what they wanted. So they made the decision to move along.
So if you had to give Harold a letter grade, his tenure, A, B, just like when you were a kid in school, what would you give his tenure?
It's hard to grade because I don't know what he was brought in to do. One of the biggest things that did happen was that the company went public. Bushiroad went public. Now, I'm not so sure how integral he was to that happening. So if it did happen, and if it happened because of him, then he would get a higher grade. But he gets, he gets an incomplete because he didn't really do much of anything. The video that he started with certainly caught a lot of people's eyes, and everybody was kind of like, oh, this is different. But moving on from there, we didn't really see a whole lot of him, and he didn't really seem to get things changed. I don't know what his plan was. I don't know what his deal was. Did he just come to get himself over with that video, and then that was it? Because most of the time, they change presidents. They change presidents like every 3 or 4 years. We don't even know it. It's a name. It's an announcement. We'll meet the person once, and then that's it. And then 3 years later, it's, we've got a new president. His name is so-and-so. Oh, okay, cool.
Well, let me just ask you. I don't mean to interrupt you.
This was the splashy hire that didn't work. Let's just say that, because this is going out, and this is Fordham University hiring Rick Pitino as the coach, and it doesn't work. You think you're going to bring in this big name guy who's going to change business, and it really just doesn't happen. You still keep playing the same, and everything kind of is the same. And then they go, why are we paying this guy all this?
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. There was a perception, at least, I don't know how accurate it was, that Harold was one of the reasons why there was no connection with, in the United States, AEW. Even though there was Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks and some other people that had previously been connected with New Japan. Do you think in hindsight that was because of Harold? Because now that Harold's gone, there seems more of a willingness between the two companies to perhaps have some dealings with one another.
I'm not sure, just because I don't know what conversations were had between Harold and Tony Khan. So I know that he wasn't I know that Kenny, the Bucks, and Cody were not big fans of his, because the minute that they started, or he started rather, he kind of got off on the wrong foot with them. But it all worked out it all worked out better for them if you think about it. So I would hope that they would never hold any bitterness towards New Japan, because in hindsight, both New Japan and Ring of Honor and their missteps with those guys have led them to this extremely lucrative and successful opportunity with AEW.
Gotcha. And Jeff, too, it's after you mentioned Antonio Inoki, not to go back, but I actually pulled it up, and it's apparently he's dealing with some sort of rare heart disease, which I guess he's had for quite a while, but I guess it's escalating. Very sad to hear this too. So Kevin, how many times since the pandemic has started, which I guess we're right at about a year now, how many times have you been back to Japan?
I was there once, and it was for the whole Wrestle Kingdom / New Beginning tour. I left December 20th, and I came back on February the 12th. There are plans for me to go back, but it had been 9 months without travel. I had returned from my last trip to Japan on February 23rd, and I was home based from February 23rd until December 19th.
Wow. So, and granted too, how are they handling things over there as opposed to the way that we may be doing it over here? Is there differences at all?
No, there is no difference at all. It is one hand not knowing what the other is doing.
Gotcha. There you go.
Inconsistencies in policy. There It makes no sense. None of it makes any sense. You can still sit down in a restaurant. When you're sitting, you can't get COVID because you don't have to wear a mask. But as soon as you stand up in that restaurant, you better have a mask on, because apparently COVID floats above the surface 5 to 6 feet in the air. But when you're seated, you're okay. You can't get it. So,
gee, it's almost like I detected a little sarcasm there.
Just a touch, Jeff, I think. Yeah.
If government wasn't involved, I think I'd be okay with it. But the minute you get government involved in anything, it becomes a colossal screw up. So I have no faith in any form of government. And it doesn't matter which party is in control. I'm not Republican nor Democrat. I don't care. I just hate the government, and I want them out of my life as often as possible. And unfortunately, they get more and more in our lives every single day.
What's that old joke? What's the scariest words you can hear? Hi, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you.
And I words you can ever hear. Yes.
Yeah. So let me ask you. I happened to be looking at I don't know if it was a YouTube video or another podcast you were on, and I heard you say something that I thought was pretty interesting. That apparently that Bret Hart had been a candidate to be an announcer for a New Japan or New Japan World or something. Tell us about that.
It was post Steve Corino, pre Don Callis, and they were looking for somebody to do the Dome or whatever that was going to have Omega versus Jericho or Omega versus Okada. It may have been that one. I can't remember. But because Kenny was involved in it, they thought it might be neat to have like a Canadian celebrity or a wrestling celebrity of some kind come in and do commentary. And the two names that were brought up to me, like, do you have any contact or any dealings with them? Do you know them? Were Bret Hart and Sting. And I thought, wow, both would be interesting. Sting was under contract to WWE at the time, and I said, that's probably not going to happen. I didn't have a contact number for Bret, and they said they would, pursue it and see what his interest level would be. And then in the meantime, Kenny had, he had a long time relationship with Don Callis. He had brought Don's name up, and they said, well, do you have a way to get a hold of Bret Hart? And Kenny was like, no, I don't know him. And they said, okay, well, then we'll just go with your guy. So that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, it would have been, I was all for it. I thought that would have been cool. I think Sting would have been cool too. I'd have been all right with that.
Yeah, that would have been interesting too. So I like that too. So we're looking at two guys that are legends, that are Hall of Famers, regardless of whatever promotion that they're working in. So taking aside your current partner in New Japan, who have you really enjoyed working with over the years? I got to tell you, I loved your partnership with Steve Corino, and it wasn't just what you guys were doing on TV, but I was at the ECW arena many times when you and Steve would come out, and it was literally like the Pope just rolled out. Like, everybody was so excited when you guys came out, and you guys were always great. You would high five ringsiders, you would make conversation. My buddy Eric Cholminski, local guy to Philly, would always talk about the Phillies with you and stuff like that, and I thought that was great. But besides your current partner, who have you really enjoyed working with?
Oh, Steve was my favorite, no doubt about it, because we were different in that we were traveling partners and roommates, because we were in Ring of Honor, we shared a room. So it was always like, we were at the hip for the entire weekend or the entire 3 or 4 days. And then, but I've had good relationships. I've never had a bad relationship, and I guess this is good. I've never had a bad relationship with anyone I've ever worked with. I have been friends with everyone, cordial at the very least. And it's never been a problem to sit down at the microphone and put the headset on. I've never said, oh, this guy. You know, like you always hear stories about Mike and the Mad Dog when they used to be together on the radio,
Oh, yeah.
that they wouldn't speak to each other except when the light was on and they were on the air. Otherwise, they would sit in total silence or ignore one another.
It's kind of like me and Barry, you know, because sometimes when we start, I'm sitting there going, oh, this guy again.
Yeah.
Well, again, and Lou clued me in on this, you know, that you roll into the studio in your chauffeured limousine.
Yes, palatial studios.
Yeah. And there's always the race for like the number one star spot. So you both instruct your drivers to get there first. And, you know, there's bitter words that are exchanged between the limo drivers.
That's true.
And Lou has to deal with these two diva personalities of Barry and Jeff. And it's a headache for him. And
well, you know, the thing that's ironic.
That's accurate, though.
The ironic thing is when we talk about who's the bigger star on the program, you know, I think Barry would agree with me that the biggest star in this program is Lou. And that's sometimes very tough for us to deal with.
Sweet Lou is amazing and the hugest star of all. But that again is that's the magic, how it all works.
Exactly. So let me ask you next, you know, Barry mentioned going to the ECW arena, and I had the chance, what's it been, like a year and a half ago now, Barry, before our world just went crazy with the COVID and stuff. I went to Philadelphia and saw a show with Marty Scurll. And I'm wondering, I've heard some scuttlebutt, didn't know if you'd heard anything about the possibility of Marty Scurll coming back to New Japan. Any rumors on that you've heard?
Well, there is always the relationship between New Japan and Marty Scurll never changed, right? That it was always very good. Everybody always liked Marty, and that his name was brought up by an alleged victim in the whole Speaking Out campaign. So there is a weighing of, I don't know what the right terminology would be, but it's what is the public perception of using someone whose name was brought up in that. There were many names that were brought up, and there are some names that have had multiple people speak out and tell a similar story. And it's like, wow, that person probably would not fit in just about any promotion because there would be backlash. And I can tell you that New Japan is not tone deaf to any criticism that is brought about. So I would think that all of that is being weighed in, and whether or not you see Marty Scurll on New Japan Strong or on any other show right now it's in the discussion process, but no more. He's not scheduled for any events, any appearances. He was at the Strong tapings not too long ago, and we will see where it happens, what happens in the future. But it's a very touchy, very sensitive issue, one that is taken seriously by New Japan, and the pros and cons are weighed out along with. It'd be nice if it was me, if I was president of New Japan, I would want to personally speak to, if possible, legal representatives, or if there are, of Marty's accuser, just to find out what their client's feeling would be about this, and how, and if basically it was absolutely not, no way, he should never be seen in polite society again. Okay, then that's taken under advisement, you know. But I think that there's let's see what the internet says. And that's never a good way to run a business. All the information. Yeah. I would want all the info. I'd talk to Marty. I'd get Marty's side of it. But then I would try to reach out and speak to, if I couldn't speak to his accuser, which I would completely understand, could I speak to somebody who might be representative of the accuser, never knowing who that person's identity is or whatever, and just get their feelings on this? Because I don't know very many of the details. I know that his name was brought up, and I know the basic tone of the accusation. Other than that, I don't know any of the details.
Wow, I think so. To stay on the same topic of ROH and the New Japan connection, I think one of the great pleasures for me is seeing the development of Switchblade Jay White over the last few years. And the first time I ever saw Jay in person was at the old ECW arena, and he was in a tag match against the Briscoe brothers. And I got to tell you, he took some abuse that night. Jay Briscoe laid into him. I was sitting ringside, and you could just hear it. And when that match was over, I was like, that kid really went through the ringer tonight. But here's a guy, and I think he's fantastic, Kevin. Here's a guy that you saw really in his early stages of his career, in a sense, at least, through ROH and New Japan, and seeing where he's at now. How has that been for you to be able to see the development of somebody like that?
There have been a few guys in my career that I have seen from the egg phase all the way through to full maturity. Like the first one was Rob Van Dam. And he was just getting his feet wet, getting out and starting to work other places when he came to the IWF for several events back in 92 or so. And you knew that he was going to be great. And with Jay, it was the same thing and then some. The one thing that has really, truly blossomed is not his physical ability, because that was always there, but just when he's on the microphone, oh my God, what a command and what a presence. He was very shy and he was very soft-spoken, and it seemed shy, seemed soft-spoken. And, it just took him a little bit to figure out that voice. And once he did, holy crap. But I've said this multiple times on the air and say this to you guys. It's the absolute truth. It wrestles like a 25-year vet. It just, everything he does is exactly in the right place at the right time and makes no mistakes that young people make. And the old conventional wisdom is that you were considered green until you had, 1,000 matches under your belt. And he's south of that, not by much, but he's still south of that and is by far exceeded all expectations. He's remarkable.
So let me ask you, this will be my last New Japan question for you. One of the things that's going on that's a big deal in AEW right now is the situation with Moxley, John Moxley and Kenta. So I'm curious, based on what you've heard, and when you were over there in Japan, how big a deal is this to the Japanese fans?
The crossover with AEW is not a big deal to Japanese fans because AEW really doesn't have a presence to the majority of the fan base in Japan. But John Moxley is a big deal, and he's the U.S. champion, and certainly everybody there knows Moxley. They made a point to play leading up to the match that aired on Strong this past Friday, the U.S. title defense at long last against Kenta. They played that they played a promotional piece as they do before New Japan events. And that garnered a lot of attention from the fans, playing that for the house. Because again, there's significant interest in Kenta. There's significant interest in John Moxley. But I don't think they're aware of the political machinations of Forbidden Door and things like that might be out of the realm of grasp of most Japanese fans.
So just to follow up on something Barry asked regarding Jay White, I understand that Jay White and Ishii pretty much tore the house down the other night.
Of course,
yeah. Which is not a huge surprise, I'm guessing.
No, not at all. Not at all. It was another great Ishii match, which great Ishii match should probably just be a retired phrase at this point because it's so redundant. You know what you're going to get with Ishii, and you got it. You got the best of it. And Jay made. It was the Jay White match. It was the Ishii match, and their styles blend so perfectly together. Ishii's in the center. Jay's on the outside, working the ropes the entire time. they're the perfect opponent for each other. There's, you know what I mean? Just their styles mesh so well. And that's really what we saw. It was tremendous.
Yeah. So, okay. So, Kevin, I had a little surprise for you that I did not tell you about. Yes, I know you love that. So, here on Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdren Barry, we reached out to a few select members of our Facebook group, people that are always participating, always active and listening to the show. And I said, hey, guess what, folks? You will have the opportunity to ask the legendary Kevin Kelly a question. And because I told them, look, Kevin Kelly's a really big deal, multiple winner of the Observer Announcer of the Year award. Can't believe he didn't win it this year, by the way. Rip off. But anyway, so I'm going to throw a few questions. And I told him, I said, look, you can ask him anything. I checked with him as long as it's respectful. So you might get a New Japan question. You might get a WWE question, or you have one that's going to be a food-related question, so I hope you're ready for that one. Are you ready, sir?
Whoa, food-related question, Jeff.
Well, I didn't want to get you excited.
Wait a minute. All right.
So, are you ready, Kevin?
I'm ready.
The first question comes from
tag in Barry. Barry at some point.
It's a three-way dance right now. So,
okay.
From friend of the show, Ian Totten. Ian says, what do you see as the future of the wrestling business, specifically the organizations that you've been involved with, as unfortunately the number of viewers worldwide seems to be shrinking?
I don't see that trend changing, unfortunately. There isn't anything that wrestling has done over the last 15 years that has redefined the sport in such a way that's going to bring large numbers of people back. You can always catch lightning in a bottle with a certain mega star who may have crossover appeal. But again, the industry, for good or bad, is driven, worldwide, mostly in the United States. It's driven by the WWE. If WWE can figure out what they want to do and can go in a more logical, plausible, acceptable direction, that might garner some mainstream press and some crossover viewership, then the industry is going to continue to lose viewers. And I think at this point, WWE has they've killed pay-per-view. They've sold off the rights for the network. They don't do house shows, and they're financially secure in terms of television deals for the next 5 years, 4 years now. So what in the world what's their motivation to grow their business, to change their business, because they've already cashed in on what they're doing. So nothing's really going to change. AEW has a chance, and I think AEW needs to dial in, refine what they're doing. They're sort of throwing many, many things up in the air and hoping something sticks. New Japan, and we also are talking about a post-COVID world, and we still don't know what live events are going to look like. We don't know how independent promotions are going to be able to put events on, which many times are the launching pad for future stars, and we don't know what any of that is going to look like yet. So it's still a wait and see approach, but WWE drives the ship on the US. I think if they move into, and I had said this 20 years ago, if they decided to rebuild territories and set up instead of taking everybody and putting them in one location, NXT at the Performance Center, if they spread them out around the country and financially supported the independents, i.e. create new regional territories, only then to take the top stars again and fold them all into WWE like they did in the mid 80s, then I think we might see something. But they would be backfilling with new guys the whole time. Take the OVW, the HWA, the Memphis model, the origins of the developmental system, and put that, on blast and bring that all around the country. Now I think we could have something. And they're doing it with the UK a little bit. They're doing it with this. But COVID, I think, has thrown many wrenches into many, many plans.
Kevin, let me see if you agree with one of the things that Barry and I have talked about before is, when Hogan first exploded nationally, say like 82, 83, 84-ish in that, because he exploded, of course, with the AWA first, and then with Vince in 84. But, one of the things that I thought that was wrong in the approach of promotions like the NWA and things like that is that they essentially tried to come up with the next Hogan. That's what Lex Luger was. To a different degree, maybe that's what Sting was. Whereas if you look at the WWF at the time, after Hogan had his run and then the Ultimate Warrior, who did they turn to? They turned to a guy like Bret Hart, who was basically the antithesis of Hogan. And then the next megastar that was created was Steve Austin, who they basically sort of stumbled on by accident. So would you agree that the next major star has to be somebody who's different than what's being seen out there now?
Well, yeah, but think about the two megastars that they've had. The two biggest stars are Steve Austin and Hulk Hogan. And if you remember, Vince Sr. fired Hogan for doing Rocky III. And then he was going to Japan. He was over in Japan and did the same act that he did in Japan with Vern. And Hulkamania took root, and then they brought him in. And with Steve, he was the ringmaster, and it was only when Steve said, I don't want to do this anymore. This is what I want to do. All right, we'll try it, pal. And it got over. So I don't know. I think they haven't they signed every potential megastar and have cut the legs out from under them when they start to get over organically?
It seems that way. That's
in most cases, yes.
Which is how Hogan and Steve, different times, different methodologies, but really they got over outside of the WWE or in spite of the WWE. And I think that that's kind of where we are now. Until they allow the brand is the biggest star. The brand is what they built, and the brand is what they cashed in on to the tune of $15 billion, I think, combined between the network on Peacock and the two TV deals with Fox and USA. So you can't fault them for that regard. They're serving their stockholders, but in terms of talent development, I'm not sure that's the way to go. So yeah, they could in a heartbeat, because they're a guy. They could have flipped the switch on Kevin Steen. They could have flipped the switch on Daniel Bryan. They could have flipped the switch on insert talent name here. Couldn't they do something with Big E? Jesus, isn't he amazing? And they've got him. They've had him there for years in this team, and he's awesome. He's everything they could want, and they've never pulled the trigger on him.
Well, I think I watched SmackDown this past week for the first time in maybe a couple of months, and it does look. I mean, Big E is getting a push. It looks like Cesaro, who is, I think is maybe one of the best wrestlers in the U.S., the world at this point. He's finally getting a push. So maybe there is some sort of direction in seeing that ratings are down and everything with that. But we also have a question from our old friend Jamie Ward. Jamie, another local Philadelphia guy. Been to the ECW arena with him many times as well. Two-part question, Kevin. Who was your favorite WWE guy to interview? And what interview with that wrestler that never aired was your favorite?
Well, my favorite to interview was The Rock, because we always had so much fun, but each one of them was live, even on the taped show. So nothing that we ever didn't make air. Let me try to think if there was something that I did with someone that never saw the light of day. Wow, that's a really good question.
Like any of those bloopers that, I know after Mean Gene passed, I think there was probably 200 of these bloopers that were released that were really funny as well. Did you ever have that kind of situation?
I can't think of, I've seen a lot of that stuff with Okerlund, and it's hysterical. Where we had more bloopers, I would say that I would have to go back and rewatch. We did a lot of that in Ring of Honor, where I would call the talent in and we would do town promos. We did that when Cornette was there. I'm sure if I went back and I watched some of that, there would be some great stuff. And I, of course, would sit in the pre-tape room when in WWE, when they were still doing those town promos. Hey, Poughkeepsie, get ready. The Owen Hart and the British Bulldog are coming. And those were hysterical because Cornette has told several of those stories. And there was one where Owen had Jim's racket and Jim's knee was bad. I guess he had hurt it at SummerSlam. And Owen whacked his knee with the tennis racket and then said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Jim." Made it like an accident, like he's just swinging the racket. And it was an Owen rib. And Jim is screaming and cursing. And, "I'm sorry. Can we just keep going? The interview's on. We need to talk about Poughkeepsie or whatever it is they were talking about."
Sure.
So those types of things were classic. But I don't know if I have any. I'm going to have to. Oh, there were a few bloopers. I used to read Superstars every week. And that would be like a long VO session with 12 or 14 pages of copy, and I would just read it, throws to different matches and packages and coming back. And they had a it was during the XFL, and I would and it was so I'm doing the XFL recaps as well. And the final season of the final week of the XFL season is here. Please hold your applause. And the crew lost it. That wasn't written. I just threw that in. So there were a few like that. I'm like, what did I say? And working with Monsoon on commentary on some tape shows.
Wow.
That would be where there was some real gems, because Monsoon would say the most outrageous, vulgar things that of course would never make air. And the producer, Tommy Carlucci, would yell, "Stop, stop." And Monsoon would be like, What did I say?" "I'm sorry. Did I say something wrong? Come on, Tommy, let's go."
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
So, okay, next question for you, Kevin, comes from Eric Cholminsky, who wanted me to remind you that he was the guy who spearheaded the fundraiser for Takayama.
Of course.
Eric's question for you, Kevin, is what is the one match in wrestling history that you wish you were at ringside calling the action for?
Hogan Rock wrestle at WrestleMania 18. That's one that comes to mind. Because that would have been really easy. You just lay out, let the crowd do it. Wow. Oh my God. Eric, this is one that it's like 3:00 in the morning. I'm going to shoot up out of bed and go, that's the one.
I guess maybe he meant not a WWE match.
Yeah, if it was, let's say, Fujinami and Inoki, 88, call that Raw.
Fantastic match.
Liger and Naoki.
Wait. Lex Luger versus Naoki Sano wouldn't have been a good match. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, that would have been interesting. How about Luger versus Brody in the cage, where Luger just walked out in Florida? That would have been a call. But no, Liger and Naoki Sano. I'm just trying to think. My God, and I've had the chance to go back and recall some of those in the archives of New Japan, but the experience is not the same because I would have been there live. Are you kidding me? I knew the result. I wouldn't have known the result if it was live. But yeah, at 88, Inoki versus Fujinami. That has to be at the top of my list.
Wow.
Or I'll give you another one. Inoki versus Billy Robinson, December of 75.
Aha. I just happen to be looking that match up today.
That's
you're talking Billy Robinson. You're right in Barry's wheelhouse there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a gem.
This is the former president of the Billy Robinson fan club in 1976 when he was working down in Florida. And I still say to this day, he is the best professional wrestler I ever saw. The stuff that he was doing, it was absolutely just incredible.
For a guy his size to be able to do those types of things, remarkable. But again, I would have loved to have been, if I could have worked for Crockett Promotions. Carino and I would always talk about this, or to work for Georgia in 83. Like that would have been some of the stuff they were doing, was unbelievable. And that was at the peak of my fandom growing up. So to be able to go back in time, we was in the car, we would have a variety of conversations, of course, as we're spending many hours together on the road. And one would be, imagine if we could go back in time and know what we know now, that age-old axiom. What would you do? Well, I would tell Vince, hey, I've got this great idea. There's this guy. He's in WCW currently, and he's like 6'10", and he's not really doing anything. His name is Mark Calloway. Now, how about this? We'll call him the Undertaker, and we'll put a manager with him. You know his manager, Percy Pringle, right? You know that guy. He'll be Paul Bearer. Get it? Get it? And he's a mortician, which is the real joke. So that was like our thing, like to go back in time and to know what we know now, and then to have all these billion-dollar ideas for Vince.
Gotcha. So quick question from our old friend Craig Halleck out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I'm going to clean this up a bit, Jeff, because he seems to be all over the place with it. But,
that's so unlike Craig.
Right. As I'm reading it, I'm going, all right, I got to remove this part, and this part. But basically, getting down to it, it's kind of a two-parter. Considering the year we just had, how is New Japan doing overall? And with Ibushi having just won the title, who would you say are the top prospects down the road to challenge him?
Well, I think New Japan is doing well, all things considered. There are restrictions on capacity. There is a state of emergency in, I think, 10 different regions of Japan. Now, 6 of them are getting ready to expire. I think as of today, they were rolling them back, and they were including Osaka and a few major markets. They're still in existence for Tokyo. So that means all shows need to be finished by 8:00. And there's a big difference between starting at 6:30 at Korakuen Hall and 6, and having to be done by 8, because there's no place to go and eat after the show is over. And getting there at 6:00 when you're leaving work on a weeknight is tough. So they're doing the best that they can. One thing that is helping New Japan is that the buildings, because there's no concerts, because there's no basketball games, because there's no nothing right now, venues are looking for dates. Venues are looking for promotions and activities to run, to have there. So they're working with New Japan financially. So the break-even point is much better than it was in the past. So you can have a building that's a quarter full, a third full, and it's still profitable. Not at the margins, of course, that they were before, but you understand the point. So they're holding their own, and once we can get through all of this, boy, it'll be better for everybody. In terms of Ibushi, I think Ibushi has been great as champion so far. I think that he has everybody to work with. We've got the New Japan Cup, which actually starts on Thursday, and we'll have live coverage of the 49th anniversary event on njpwworld.com with live English commentary. We're very excited for that. So everybody can get up nice and early on Thursday morning, and we'll be at the Nippon Budokan. I'll be calling it from home. But the New Japan Cup tournament starts with a pair of matches, including, oh my gosh, who's Tetsuya Naito working? He's got an interesting opponent, a match I don't think he's had before. I think it's against the Great Okan. I'm not sure. But anyway, there's a couple of fascinating matches. And I think the winner of that New Japan Cup tournament will be the next challenger for Ibushi. And just like last year, when my original pick to win the New Japan Cup was the winner of the first round match between Okada and Jay White, which didn't happen. The same thing is going to happen this year. The winner of the New Japan Cup, according to my picks, is going to come from the first round match involving Kazuchika Okada and Shingo Takagi. I have said for months, I think Shingo can be the guy to win the New Japan Cup this year. And of course, what do the New Japan matchmakers do? They put him in against Okada in the first round. Just looking to bust my bracket right away. So that's where I think it could come from. And that title defense will happen at Sakura Genesis the 1st of April. So that's where my head is at. I think he can have great matches with everybody.
So Barry, before we get to our match of the day, matches. Ooh, did I just do that? That's right, 2 matches of the day. Want to mention a couple people that are in our thoughts right now. That's first of all Jim Crockett Jr. It's been posted in numerous Twitter feeds, Facebook pages that Jim Crockett Jr. going through a lot of health difficulties, and we want to send out best wishes and thoughts from Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdren Barry to the Crockett family.
Yeah, it's they've been very vague about what's going on. It's just severe health issues, and that I believe the comment was, please keep Jim in your thoughts. He could use everything that he can get right now. So certainly under the impression that it's real serious too. And Jim Crockett, it just, you go back with the legacy of the Crockett family, and it goes back, to the 40s to the 30s as far as promoting. And in my opinion, it's kind of a shame. I know that there was talk years ago Crockett was going to start another promotion. It never materialized, but he's a real part of our childhoods, and for many young adulthoods as well. So I'm certainly hopeful that he'll be able to pull out of this, Jeff.
Yeah, and we, of course, recently, as of, I believe, yesterday, I don't think it's when he passed away. He had passed away maybe a week or so before, but it just came out, was that Dean Ho, former co-champion of the WWF tag teams, champions like in mid-70s with Tony Gurria. And I actually reached out to Barry and asked him if he had ever been in CWF. You told me he had not, but Dean was definitely a big star up in the Pacific Northwest. And I think in Hawaii, Dean Higuchi, Dean Ho Barry, we lost recently.
Yeah, and he was a guy too, a real big star in the Northwest, whether it's California, Oregon, Washington, crossing over into Canada and Vancouver. He was a big star. Obviously, had that run with Tony Gurria where they were tag team champions, and Dean had a run in Georgia. And I believe that was around 75 or so. And I think he did one match in Florida, which might have been Tallahassee. Sometimes the guys that were working in Georgia, they would come over to Tallahassee to do one match. A guy like Stan Stasiak is a great example of that. So, yeah, never got a chance. But I'll tell you what, Dean Ho was a guy I always wanted to come to Florida, and I always wanted to see him. And I believe they called him the Happy Hawaiian. And he really always appeared to be like this really friendly, nice guy. And that is apparently in real life exactly how he was. Anybody that knew him just only could say these really great positive things about him. So real sorry to hear about this too. Rest in peace, Dean Higuchi.
Yeah. And my friend Jeff Sharkey, who I met through the different groups and at CAC, posted some pictures, and he talked about his interactions with Dean through CAC and some interviews that he had done with him, and just spoke, as you just did, very, very glowingly about him, about a guy that was always very happy to talk to you and share things with you. And, one of the things I thought was very interesting was, in looking back at pictures, people like to talk about superstar Billy Graham being the first guy that really got over. And now, of course, I'm sure someone's going to remind me of somebody else before that. But as far as the physique and the bodybuilder, yeah, I know,
Sailor Art Thomas.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Thank you. And Bruiser and Crusher too. But Dean Ho was a guy that apparently was a power lifter, I think, and had his upper chest. If you look at pictures of him when he held the title with Tony Gurria, he had a huge upper body, and obviously spent some time in the gym working on that. As Gorilla Monsoon was wont to say, he definitely spent some time in the
taking his vitamins and all of that. Absolutely too. And I think, and you're right about that too. I think he was all natural in the regards that he wasn't overly muscular. He was just big. He was a guy that looked like a powerhouse. And I don't believe he was very tall. I think he was, maybe that 5'9" to 5'10", maybe 5'11" range. So not a guy that was super tall, but gave the appearance of like a strong man.
Yeah. So Barry, as we move on again, we raise an adult beverage to the memory of Dean Ho. I have to tell you, Mrs. Bowdren, just coming in from a trip to Ohio, and she brought me something, Barry. This is what's called a smooth transition here, boy. I'm going to send you a photo of what Mrs. Bowdren has brought me back from Ohio, Barry.
All right.
Tell me when you get it. That's dead air, folks.
That
Have
is
you got?
dead. I did. There it is.
Yes.
There it is.
Mrs. Bowdren coming through with the Reese's snack cake.
How
Yes.
excited are you? Look at that.
Yeah, she brought me 6 of them.
Nice.
Apparently, Mrs. Bowdren wants me to put a little weight on. I don't know. But yeah, thank you very much there, honey bunny.
You'll be able to crank this out in no time. And Jeff, you'll be able to. It depending on your frame of mind, the first 2 go down really easy. I did 6 in one shot, but I was under the influence, so it doesn't quite count.
I hate when that happens.
I actually really enjoyed that. But Jeff, I wanted to touch on something quickly too, based off of my big revelation last week.
Yes.
And it was, I got to tell you, this was a very heartwarming week. I received upwards of about 50 messages, and it was everyone offering me support. And there was a lot of the usual suspects in that list, people that we consider our family and our friends. And they reached out and just saying, hey, if you need me, here's my cell phone number, feel free. But what really, I guess, surprised me and a lot was the amount of people that reached out to offer support and to tell me their own stories. And these are people, Jeff, that we have really never had interaction with. And it really said a lot regarding the podcast. It spoke a lot, to the podcast and the fact that we know that we're reaching a certain audience, we're reaching a certain crowd, and it's the people that we interact with on our Facebook page. But at the same time, there is a large group of people out there that we have no interaction other than our show. And there were several that are going through very similar circumstances that I am. And they reached out and they appreciated the fact that I was able to speak honestly and openly about it. And there was one gentleman in England that apparently is now looking at his situation differently. And quite frankly, that was not something I think I thought about beforehand, but at the same time that I couldn't be any happier about that. So I want to thank everybody for their concern. I'm doing all right, as you can tell. I'm going to go down and hit some of Jeff's Reese's snack cakes. But
I have enough available. I'll tell you.
You do, but you'll be surprised at how quickly they go. But I really appreciate the comments this week. I appreciate people reaching out and the fact that people care. It's always a big deal, Jeff. You went through it when people would check up on you. And, there was one day I logged in and I had 14 messages in Facebook, and 13 of those messages were, "You doing okay, brother? You okay?" And it means everything, especially at this stage. So thank you.
Well, I can tell you that, when we got done interviewing our guest this week, Kevin Kelly, after we got done recording, the first thing he said to me is, "I haven't talked to you lately, Jeff. How's your health? How's everything going?" Which, that really means a lot.
It does.
When you're going through a struggle, whether it's emotional along your lines or physical along the lines that I've gone through over the past year. And by the way, Barry, I know it's getting ready to pop up in my Facebook memories section. The day when I got the news. Oh boy, that's going to be a tough one to go through. So, but
Jeff, to just to step back and in some ways, I completely get what you're saying. But your first reaction when that went down was you did think this was a possible death sentence, and here you are now.
First thing I said to my wife was,
"I know
I'm going to die." Yeah.
And you shared that with me, and your wife shared that with me, and it's here you are a year later, arguably healthier than you've been in the last 40 years, maybe.
Well, now wait a minute, Mr.
30 years, but I'm saying you're healthier, you look better, you've got a box of Reese's snack cakes. Life is good right now. Embrace it, celebrate it,
So what I was going to say was, when you said that all these people reaching out to you, asking how you were doing, I did not know, just because we have people in our Facebook group, which, by the way, Barry, may I mention, last time I checked, we're up to 1725 plus. Yeah, baby. Nice. And I thought maybe someone would reach out to you and say, "Barry, I'm very sorry to hear about the situation you're going through, but can I introduce you to my sister?" So you didn't get any of that. Is that what you're saying?
No. So, well, no. And let me tell you, those are the ones I was looking for. I would have wanted that, but not one person said, "Hey, and by the way, can I get your wife's phone number?" I didn't get any of those either. So
that's comforting coming from our group, especially.
Yes, that's for sure.
So, anyway, Barry, as we mentioned at the top of the show today, as far as our matches of the week go, today is Dick Murdoch Day, Captain Redneck, if you will. He's either Captain Redneck or he's the guy wearing the Marine Corps hat and got the shovel and stuff like that. And as a matter of fact, one of our matches today is the guy that he stole the gimmick from. Your favorite wrestler. What does Barry Rose love more than food? He loves cocks. Yes.
And so what's interesting is
to grab that question and run with it.
Look, at this stage, it's either shitting on lawns, Ethiopian, or loving cock. So if you don't embrace it and accept it, Jeff, you'll drive yourself crazy.
The other way you could say it is, we're both big Murdoch fans. So would we both say that we love Dick? Well, I don't know, but that's another question.
And arguably, this is Cox and Dick.
It's Dick versus Cox. Okay, now we're 13 years old again. So
we are.
Our matches this week, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we have Dick Murdoch taking on Terry Gordy. Boom! That's a couple of heavy hitters right there from the Sam Houston Coliseum in Houston, Texas. We're talking October 8th, 1982. Barry, tell us real quick, what did you think about this match?
Yeah, so this is a good match, but this match did not blow me away, and I don't know. Maybe
I like the second one better. Let's be honest.
And here was the irony: is I watched the second match first, and that makes me think, what if I had watched the Gordy match first? Maybe I would have. But I still don't think that's going to change. This was a good match. I think if you haven't watched a lot of Dick Murdoch, I'm assuming that a lot in our group, they've watched a lot of Terry Gordy matches. But if you haven't seen a lot of Dick Murdoch, then I think you'll like this match. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this match. Nick Kozak, former guest on Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdren Barry, is the referee. This is arena footage. Houston, Texas, Jeff? Is it Houston?
Yes. Correct.
Yeah, so it's arena footage. There's no commentary. I do think this match would have been helped by some commentary, but this...
I will say, I don't mean to interrupt you, Barry.
Yeah.
When you said this is not highlights, it's not a highlight. This is an actual full... I want to say 12-minute match, but I didn't want people to think it was just, like 5 minutes of highlight package. It's not. It's a full match.
It's a full match from start to finish. And I think the only complaint I would have about this match is if you've seen these guys work, then you've kind of seen what you're going to see. And, Murdoch's doing the usual Murdoch stuff. He's the baby face in this match. Gordy's doing all of his stuff. Murdoch's doing the flying head scissors, which occasionally he would pull out out of his repertoire and do. There was just nothing here that stood out to me. And there's no botch. There's nothing here. There's not even any rest holds. These guys are on the go right from the moment. But I just felt like I had seen this match before, and I'm not sure if I ever have seen this match, but I definitely got the deja vu feeling, though.
Well, okay. First of all, I want to bring up a couple points. Was this the best of Dick Murdoch? Was it the best of Terry Gordy? No. Does that mean that it's a bad match? Not at all. First of all, again, it's a 12-minute match. So, if they'd gone out and given them 25 or 30 minutes, maybe it would have been a better match. But I tell you the one thing that I got about it, we've mentioned Dick Murdoch before as a guy that could have been, a candidate for the NWA World Title back in the 70s. And based on, I will say, based on the second match that we're going to talk about, that was held in 1976. Yeah, absolutely, he could have been. But the guy that we kind of tend to forget, and here in 1982, he would have been 21 years old. 21 years old, Barry. Terry Gordy is a guy that does not get enough mention as a guy that could have been a potential NWA World Champion. Tell me I'm right or tell me I'm wrong.
You're 100% correct with that, Jeff. You're 100% right.
Check. Okay, we got that out of the way. But now, I understand there are going to be certain things that were going to be held against Terry Gordy. Let's be honest, his lifestyle, even at that point, was one that he was kind of a wild man, and that certainly would have been held against him as any potential candidate to be, I say that, and of course, Flair probably partied harder than Terry Gordy did. But Terry Gordy, he, unlike Flair, would let the lifestyle sometimes overtake him, where Flair, we famously told the story about Ric Flair being out in New Orleans before a match with Terry Taylor, where he was going to go 60 minutes, and he basically walked into the dressing room half an hour before the match started and was still, needed a little bit of the hair of the dog that bit him, if you know what I mean. And, he was still hungover, and he went out and had a great match, a 60-minute Broadway, I think it was, with Terry Taylor in the Superdome. So, could Terry Gordy do that? Who knows? But that being said, Terry Gordy in this match was, for a guy that weighed a couple bucks shy of 300 pounds, was bumping his ass off and was fantastic for a man his size. And I think, given the right circumstances, I don't know at that point, and I'll throw this to you. At that point, I want to say 1982. Let's just say a couple years down the road, okay? Would Michael Hayes have helped the potential candidacy of Terry Gordy the way he did in the UWF, or would he have hindered it as a potential world title candidate, Barry?
Jeff, another excellent question that you're proposing.
I try.
So and what makes that an excellent question is, if you do stop and think about it, I believe that Hayes would have hindered, unlike what he had done a year or two earlier, where he was right there at the career was escalating of Terry Gordy. I think at this stage, and I think if you're looking at him as a world title candidate, I would see Michael Hayes as more of a hindrance than anything else.
And I think that's a fair point, because Michael was you okay there, Bear?
I apologize. My microphone just ripped from my hands, but yes, I'm good.
So I thought maybe Ozzy wanted to say something about the situation. Hayes to me enhanced Terry Gordy in the UWF. Okay, but at some point, Terry Gordy needed to be that guy that sort of, what he became in All Japan when he, went to All Japan, made his own way, and became a main event guy in the early 90s for Baba with All Japan. And, maybe, as a guy, they brought in Dr. Death and Terry Gordy as a tag team to face off with the Steiners. At that point in his career, obviously before he had the situation that befell him on a trip to Japan. But I think in the early 90s, he would have been a guy that I think would have been an excellent candidate to take the belt. Like if Terry Gordy defeated Sting or Luger, and he was like a new guy. One of the things we talked about in our interview with Kevin Kelly was, do you want to have the same guy that's in the WWF, or that, do you want to have Ric Flair 2.0, or do you want to have a new version, something new to give the audience, which I think promoters don't think about enough. That's what I think fans want. That you have to give them something new to kind of expand their horizon, if you will, which I believe is the first time we've ever used the term expand their horizon.
That's a good one too.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So this is a good match. Before we get to our next match, I will tell you, Barry, I put up 4 matches, and these 2 matches were the ones that got the highest vote total by far. But I will say, if I get a chance, I will put in the group the match with Dick Murdoch and Kevin Von Erich from St. Louis Television. It's either the very end of 1979 or the very early part of 1980. And for a studio match, St. Louis was not a town. They were known for very solid technical wrestling, but they ran very few angles. They depended just on the stars and stuff like that, I think. And it was very, let's just say it wasn't exactly Memphis as far as all hell breaking loose on a regular basis. You get my drift there?
Oh, yeah.
But the match with Kevin Von Erich and Dick Murdoch was a really good television match. Kevin Von Erich was absolutely shredded in this match. And I'm going to post that because I think it's a match that deserves to be seen. And Kevin Von Erich was still wearing the boots at the time. And the other match that I posted that only I think got a few votes was a match with Murdoch and Barry Windham from a house show in Philadelphia, I believe, Barry, in 1985. And as I watched it, I said, I know how much you appreciated the match with Murdoch and Adonis versus Jack and Jerry Briscoe, which I think was from 1984. And as I watched this match, I was like, wow, these are 2 guys that really know what the hell they're doing. They really know one another. And they had a really good match, too. And I will try to post that one on there because I think that's a match that deserves to be seen also, Barry.
Yeah. And so you just brought up a good point, and that is two guys who really knew each other that were able to go out and have a great match. And, what's funny is I had a conversation with somebody. I don't know why I get into these conversations either, Jeff, but it was, in my opinion, the WWE is not professional wrestling any longer. And certainly you can make a case that it hasn't been for the last 30 years or 35 years. But my point being, because of the pandemic, they're essentially able, and there's no live audience, they're essentially able to go in and make all these edits and present it as live. And point being, all this stuff with Randy Orton, and you would have no idea what I'm talking about, Jeff. I could hear the wind over the top of your head as I'm sitting here right now. But in essence, Alexa Bliss is doing this character where she has been, I guess, under the spell of Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, and they'll show her in the ring, and then a minute later, 30 seconds later, she's done a wardrobe change where she's almost a different character. And it's very obvious, that if they're stopping filming or whatever, and she's changing and coming back out there, but they're presenting this as real. And to me, this is kind of where I think professional wrestling, it's over. At this point, what they're doing is more entertainment. It's not professional wrestling. But back in the day, guys like Gordy and guys like Murdoch, and we're going to talk about Killer Karl Cox and Dick Murdoch in a minute. Cox and Murdoch would have wrestled in Mid-South. They would have wrestled in West Texas. They did wrestle in Florida. They wrestled
Oklahoma.
in Japan. Here were guys that knew how to work with each other. And so the winners of that were the fans, because you were getting these really great matches because, you could watch. And again, we're going to get to Murdoch and Cox, but there's points when Murdoch knows exactly what Cox is going to do. He's looking at him, and as he's looking at him, he knows exactly what he's going to do. And I just think that's great. And I don't think you truly get that any longer unless they're doing a lot of rehearsing and things like that.
Yeah. The one thing is, I was thinking, I don't know where I read this, but when I was watching the match with Cox and Murdoch, that Karl Cox looks like the guy who you run into at the high school football game, whose kid plays on the team. He doesn't look like what you think a wrestler is going to look like. He's got a little bit of a pouch hanging over. He's completely bald down the middle of his head. Costanza-esque, if you will, just so we could slip in a Seinfeld reference there, Barry. And yet this guy was tougher than a 3-day-old steak. He just went out there and did it. And you don't see those guys nowadays in the current product, the WWF. And one of the WWE, one of the comments that Kevin Kelly made was that the WWE is essentially out of the house show business. They do what is it, Monday night, and is it Thursday or Friday they do SmackDown?
Friday. And then they do NXT on Wednesday.
Yeah, and then of course, they got the pay-per-view seemingly all the time. I don't know, do they do once a month or once every 6 weeks now or whatever?
Yeah, I think it's once a month, yeah.
Yeah. And so he's absolutely correct. He is very 100% correct that they're essentially out of the house show business. So whether that's because of COVID or that's because of that's just the way they want their business to run now with the all the different outside the contracts with the different companies that have bought the rights, and maybe they don't feel the need to do the house show business anymore. And I'm sure the boys are very appreciative of not having to make the kind of travel schedule they did during the mid 80s. But so anyway, so we will post a link to the Terry Gordy Dick Murdoch match. Like I said, 12 minutes. Terry Gordy is bumping his ass off, and it's awesome to see a guy that's 300 pounds that was still very, very young. Keep in mind when you watch this match, Dick Murdoch has been a pro for probably 10 plus years at this point. But Terry Gordy is 21 years old when he's wrestling this match. And there are not a lot of guys that are 21 years old that are performing at this kind of level. And it's really just amazing to watch. Okay, now, Barry, now we'll get to the kind of stuff that gets Barry all hot and bothered, and that's Cox and Dick. And in this particular case, Dick Murdoch and Killer Karl Cox from the early part of December 1976 in Tokyo. And boy, when I found this match, Barry, I went, holy shit, Barry is going to do an Ethiopian number on his bed because he's going to be so excited to see this match. This match, folks, I got to tell you, it's a good 20 to 25 minutes. It is a knockdown, drag out, old style Mid-South match. where they're just beating the hell out of one another, double juice. It's great stuff. Okay, now, Barry, that I've given you that, tell us what you thought of the match.
That's a hell of a build-up too, Jeff. It's
now if you said, boy, this match sucked.
Yeah. And with all this talk of Cox and Dick, you just know that there's some guy going, that's why he and his wife separated. Now it all makes sense.
Can you confirm or deny those rumors?
I will deny those rumors. And again, as Jeff mentioned earlier, if there is a sister, an aunt,
an ex-wife,
an ex, whatever, look.
I can give you both my ex-wife's numbers if you want them.
After the stories you have told me, Jeff, I will do a hard pass.
Okay.
Yes. But anyways, this match is absolutely, this is right in my wheelhouse. This is a fantastic match. And as I mentioned, these guys worked with each other for 20 years, maybe even a little bit longer. They were working together for so many years. The only other guy you could really throw into this mix would be Ted DiBiase. Ted worked with both of these guys also for years. And there's so many similarities between Cox and Murdoch, too. This match really becomes the battle of the brain busters. And the brain buster was essentially a suplex, but instead of dropping a guy on his back, you would bring him down on the back of his neck. And, again, I must have seen Cox and Murdoch. I don't know if I ever saw them work against each other in person, but as far as seeing them live, I would have seen them hundreds of times, and they were just spectacular in doing the brain buster. This match is different in the fact that it's a little different than a U.S. match would have been at this stage as well. And I should say 76, you're probably seeing these two guys in their primes. Maybe Cox had already crossed over a little bit. You certainly don't see it. He actually looks in great shape here. Murdoch, though, still relatively young. I want to say he started in the late 60s. So he's under 10 years as a veteran. He's already got the beer gut, which is great. But he's still got that Murdoch baby face thing going. Karl Cox, and we've talked about this before, the 6-inch punch. And I've always been fascinated. And I remember telling my son the stories of the 6-inch punch, but Cox was known in wrestling for throwing a punch where he would only 6 inches wind back and then hit somebody in the face. And apparently there was enough force where he could knock you out by doing it. He incorporated that. That was a shoot too. He incorporated that into professional wrestling, and he does a lot of these short chopping punches that just look really effective. But to what you said earlier, because these guys had worked together so much, the selling, especially Murdoch for Cox, it's off the charts. Cox will hit him with the 6-inch punch. Murdoch is flying halfway across the ring, which is great. Midway through the match, the referee calls for the bell. The bell is rung, but the match continues. So I don't fully understand it. But I don't really care either. Cox then busts open Dick Murdoch with some sort of foreign object. I think it was the timekeeper's bell that he was using. He also kept reaching in his trunks for the.
Maybe he was just adjusting.
He could have been adjusting. But and I like that he's constantly reaching into the trunks and pulling out the brass knuckles and then hiding it from the referee, which I think is great. But he nails Murdoch, and I think it is the bell, the timekeeper's bell. Murdoch, never a stranger or afraid to blade. He is a bloody mess, and this is beautiful. Japan has done such a great job of preserving their footage that if you were seeing 1976 footage from America, it's fifth generation. Roy Lucer's cats have peed all over it, Jeff. That's
the take a dump on Roy Lucier episode.
And we love Roy. We're totally fucked because I love Roy. There is not a nicer guy on the face of the earth. But my point being, they've done such a great job of really preserving their footage, and I don't always feel the same about American companies. But this looks.
Are you saying, like, for example, John McAdams' copies weren't pristine? There's our shot at John McAdams.
There's our shot. Yeah, we should just stick to wrestling, Jeff. And
I see what you did there. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. But they really have. And where this works is Murdoch is a bloody mess, and it's just vibrant, and it's just, it's just so great to see it. There's nothing blurry here. Cox then gets busted open right after, and both men are bleeding. These aren't like little trickling down the forehead type of blades or something. These are guys that definitely are bleeding. There's a point where I think Cox is behind Murdoch, and then he backs away, and there's this bloody patch on Murdoch's back that makes you think he's bleeding from his back, but he's not. It's just Cox's blood. What I loved, Dick goes for the brain buster, and he screams it out. He goes brain buster, and there's this loud pop coming from the crowd. I thought that was fucking awesome. Murdoch throws the referee out of the ring. Then the young boys come in the ring to separate them. And when I say young boys, that is the official term, because some of these guys are in their 30s. So they're definitely not young boys.
Good looking tracksuits, though.
Oh, the best. I'd love to get a hold of one of those, but they're all wearing these red New Japan tracksuits. They pop in the ring to start to separate them. And when that happens, Murdoch and Cox essentially give simultaneous brain busters to these young boys. So I got to tell you, this is it's a good match. It's a very good match, but it's also a match I really loved. You have there's been a lot of debate. Christian Alt, where are you, Chris? Where are you? I know that you're out there. You don't believe Dick Murdoch belongs in the Hall of Fame. I think this match could change anyone's appearance. Killer Karl Cox, unheralded, his career essentially ended, I want to say by 1982 or so. Not a ton of footage, but if you want to see a great heel, a great old school professional wrestler, and as Jeff said, a guy who kind of looks like your uncle. He's balding, he's got a gut, but boy, did you believe he could kick your ass when he got in the ring. This is the match for you.
So, Mr. CWF, there, I have a question for you.
Certainly.
Of course, people that are fans of wrestling for the 80s would, of course, recognize the Brainbuster, not just from Dick Murdoch, but that was the whole Jimmy Garvin used. So was there an angle, just because I wasn't watching CWF for a portion, was there an angle when Jimmy Garvin was sort of the protege of Karl Cox, where he was taught the Brainbuster by Karl Cox?
Oh, Jeff, let me make today's show an 8-hour show. So
I'm sure our executive producer will love that.
And I'm sure sweet Lou Kipilman, who's probably like, shit, I want to go eat some rice-a-roni right now in San Francisco, is like, it's time to get off. But I'll quickly encapsulate this. So yeah, Jimmy Garvin was he was Tampa born and bred, Jimmy Garvin, as we found out when we did the interview with him. And he was a guy that didn't spend a lot of time in Florida, but we had him in 1976 as Bo James, who was the manager of Ray Stevens. He left and came back in late 1977 as Jimmy Garvin, going into 78 as Jimmy Garvin. Same guy, you could see, look, there was no difference physically, but he was a young prelim wrestler. And I think up until that stage, Garvin had done most of his work as being the manager for either Ronnie or Terry Garvin, or as a team, the Garvins. So he came in and he was getting this small push, which was primarily taking place on television, where Gordon was putting him over as this young talent that shows a lot of promise, but not getting a big push yet, beating job guys and carpenters on TV and doing the same in the arenas, but he really wasn't facing main event guys yet. So Killer Karl Cox it took Garvin underneath his wing, much as you suspected, and made him, quote unquote, an honorary Marine. And Cox used to always wear this red Marine, like windbreaker type of jacket. Got one for Garvin, and they would wear these matching to the ring. And then we saw the slow ascension, the slow rise of Garvin, going from third match of the night to fifth match, eventually becoming Florida and Southern heavyweight champion and one half of the tag champions with Killer Karl Cox, the U.S. tag team champions. But in this angle, Cox also taught him the brainbuster, and which is why Jimmy worked and then carried that and used that hold for years. This angle eventually wound up with Killer Karl Cox becoming jealous of all the attention that Garvin was receiving, turning on him and turning heel, almost identical to what was done in Mid-South, which Kevin Kelly mentioned between Magnum TA and Mr. Wrestling 2 a few years later.
So I'm sure if there's anything in that description that is incorrect, we'll be getting a post from Bob McKeon saying your timelines are skewed. It was exactly this date, yada, yada, yada. So, but no, that great stuff. And again, this match, as Barry said, just a friggin' throwdown, double juice, like just brawling all over the ring, and two guys that just, much like we talked about the Rock and Roll in the Midnight, they knew each other so well they could have a great match in their sleep probably.
Yes.
So this is definitely a match that's highly recommended. Of the two matches, I'm going to agree with Barry. This is the better of the two matches, but I don't want you to forego the Gordy match, which is also a very good match. So want to, as we're closing out, Barry, mention a couple of things real quick. We discussed recently that we are going to soon be announcing Patreon episodes. Boom! Boom! The excitement level is going up. Yes, I want to throw out a couple of things that we're considering. As I mentioned earlier in the show, what we did with reaching out to people who are active in our group and offering them the chance to ask a question or two, Mark Hertwick, to Kevin Kelly, perhaps in the future on a Patreon episode. As a listener and a follower of our Facebook group, Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdren Barry, you could have the opportunity to ask, I don't know, Bob Rube, Steve Kern, somebody like that, or maybe Barry and I a question, because let's face it, we're both very important people, Barry. Besides that, could also be offering an additional episode of Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdren Barry, not available for free, but for a small monetary donation to Patreon on our behalf. So then this has been a long way. We also could possibly do a watch along with a CWF show, a Georgia show. That's some thought. But then the one, Barry, that I think will get lots of attention. We've talked about it on a few occasions off the air, and I think this is one that could be lots of fun. Yes, via the Patreon, folks, you will have the opportunity to hear the episode where Jeff and Barry get loaded. Yes, Barry, I know the drunken / stoned episode. I'm not going to say which is which and who's who. Could be a lot of fun, Barry. What do you think?
I think that could be maybe the best time we've had. And what would be amazing is the second we're done recording, I'll be like, what the fuck just happened? Like, that's what I think would be. And then I'll go to bed at night and I'll wake up at 3:00 in the morning and I'll go, did I really just fucking say that? Did I really say that on air? So yeah, that's it's a Patreon episode and one that is best kept under lock and key so that it doesn't get out to the general public.
Exactly. And now finally, before we go home, I'm going to break kayfabe to Mr. Barry Rose about something he does not know about. Why? Well, let's just say Barry's a busy man. Aww. And when I reach out to him, I say, can you talk? No, I'm busy with work. Or no, I'm hanging out with Zoe this weekend.
That's
and
true.
I'm like, what's more important, your daughter or me? Come on, I'm your business partner.
Right.
So I recently, over the weekend, at the time we're recording this on Monday, had a discussion with the great Brian Last, executive producer of Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdren Barry, about Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdren Barry merchandise. Oh, yes. Let's just say that I was told by Mr. Last that, say, for example, Barry, people have said every once in a while, we've made a comment, issued a statement that kind of caught fire, like your very own fire, or Ozzy barking in the background. I don't know. Or we have the Jeff, you're 100% correct. Barry, think of some other catchphrases we've come up with. You got anything right on top of your head?
Well, there's always the shitting stuff.
Yes,
right. That's always been big. I love Cox has been big.
That's another one. Yes.
Yeah.
So what I was informed by Mr. Last is that when we have one of those things, and I referenced the Jeff, you're 100% correct, because quite frankly, it's about me. He said that the person that he signed his agreement with could do perhaps a Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdren Barry t-shirt with our images on it. And in the back, on the back of the shirt, we have, Jeff, you're 100% correct, or some catchphrase that we've done before in the past that people liked, like fire, something like that. So these could become available in the very near future. We will keep you apprised. Barry, thoughts, views, comments.
So how exciting. So we did talk about this. We didn't get fully in depth with it, but you had mentioned that you were in preliminary conversations. I think it's exciting, and people have been asking, and
Hats
has been a big one.
Coaster.
And I know the 605 had like this there were like koozies and coasters and all kinds of things. But look, I think it's great. And the hats and T-shirts, absolutely. And look, at some point, there is going to be another CWF Legends Fan Fest. And Jeff, how nice would it be to have a table set up with all of this merchandise?
Yes, and I will tell you on behalf of Barry Rose, if you are willing to spend money on this merchandise, if you wear this merchandise when it comes out at the next CWF Legends, I've talked with David Pinzer about this. He will give you a 0.5% discount.
What?
Half a point.
Wow. That's Pinzer though, man. That's incredible.
I'll tell you what. So Barry, as we close out the episode,
close the store. Let's go home.
We're going to close the store for the week.
Yeah.
I'm going to do something that I've never done on this show before.
All right.
Barry, I have opened the Reese's snack cake.
Uh-oh.
Live here as we're recording.
All right. Do me a favor. So the package is open, correct?
And it's open. Sniffing.
And first impression as you sniff it?
First of all, I love the fact that on the cover of the package, it says made with real milk chocolate. Thank God they didn't use that imitation crap.
Yep.
Yeah. So it smells very chocolatey. I'm trying to think of, in a way, a little bit Three Musketeer bar-ish.
All right.
Is that a word? Okay. Now I'm trying. Hold on one second. I hope America and the world likes to hear me chew.
I don't know if I think you did that in one of the earlier episodes.
The chocolate snack cake to peanut butter ratio looks to be about 2/3 to 1/3. 2/3 chocolate, 1/3 peanut butter. I wish it was closer to half.
All right.
That is my only complaint about the bar. It's very tasty. No, I'm very tasty. I will not predict how soon the packages of 6 will be gone from the Bowdren household, but I won't. I'll say probably by the weekend it'll be gone. How about that?
All right. Well, yeah. I don't know. You haven't had dinner yet either, though, right?
That's true.
Yeah. Good dinner, and then you look for something sweet right after.
Exactly.
What is on the docket tonight, Jeff, if you will? Docket being, obviously a little pun, court reference. What's on the docket for dinner tonight?
Well, Mrs. Bowdren, of course, as I said, coming in from Ohio, so we still have to hit the grocery store tonight. So I'm not exactly sure. But what I am sure of, how about that for a smooth transition, Barry, is that Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdren Barry is a production of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network. Smooth as silk, my friend. Ooh. Hey, Barry, I know you want to join me, and Lou wants to mention, too, how great a guest Kevin Kelly was. And, boy, we had a lot of fun with him, and we want to have him back again. Just as Barry said when we stopped the recording, well, he's a professional broadcaster, and he sounded like it. Absolutely, Barry.
Yeah, he's and then as you were taking a break, and Sweet Lou and I were just chatting and stuff too. He's the kind of guy that when he's on air, it's much like when you and I most of the time I never think the fact that we're actually recording this. It's just a conversation that you and I are just fucking around. And with Kevin, it's like he just slid right in there. I just felt like we were just talking to a friend of ours. He's fantastic.
Into glove, my friend.
There you go.
Yeah. So anyway, and by the way, you were speaking to Kevin about possibly having a dinner with him in the near future. And if you do plan something, I might have to take a trip up to Philadelphia and join you. I'm just going to say that. So
can you with the check, my friend?
Well, I wouldn't. I'll have to say that.
All right.
But until next week, we appreciate you joining us, folks, and we will talk to you later.